Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the We Can't Wrestle podcast. The brothers Max and I'm Nate. That's Aaron.
Hello.
Here with you on a fine, cold Ohio evening.
It's a little better than it was yesterday.
Yeah, it is a little better than it was yesterday.
They got up to 30 today. Something like that.
It's a heat wave.
We're having a heat wave.
Gonna find me laying out in the snow, and Aaron will go, "Are you dead?"
Are you dead?
I love that. And grumpy old man, like if he was dead, he was gonna answer.
Are you dead?
Are you dead? Fucking Mathal, man. Anyway, Mathal and Lemon. All of them, yes. Mathal, Lemon, Burgess Meredith. What a cast.
It's like all those jokes that they put in like that blooper reel when he's like trying to fuck
Yeah.
the even older lady.
And he was just improvising those.
Oh, he was. That lady loses her mind at the end of it. It's like, why didn't you just leave those in the movie? Those would have been great.
That's like I read somewhere that there is because he improvised so much when they were making the movie. There is the one that got released, rated PG. There's a rated NC-17 and a rated R version of Mrs. Doubtfire. And I wish, in honor of Robin Williams, they would release the rated R version of Mrs. Doubtfire.
I don't want to see the NC-17.
You talk to any or hear from any director that ever directed him. It was always a long shoot with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
But we are discussing the PWI 500 from 1995 as we continue our journey through said 500. Last week we had 138. It was Johnny Gunn, Sal Sincere, whatever you want to call him. At this time he was Johnny Gunn. And now we are starting this week off with number 137. All parties involved here, fans of this guy, Bob Orton Jr., 6'1", 245, 23 years pro. As we get into these names that we know so well and not so much the indie guys, and maybe I won't necessarily read the whole description like I do for the indie guys, because with the indie guys it's fun because you kind of get their story.
Yeah.
But let's see, Bob, and actually it's funny, Bob had lost in the tournament finals in 95 or late 94, early 95 for the AWF heavyweight title to Tito Santana. It's funny, I was just telling Aaron, I finally found my Warriors of Wrestling DVD set that is the complete, pretty much, AWF, because it didn't last that long. And I'm actually watching those shows right now. But
I can remember seeing it on TV. Yeah, it's like, that's what I was saying. Bob wasn't obviously in any major promotion at this time and was just doing indies and whatnot and just, doing like the Greg Valentine. Like, I guarantee he's on a lot of shows with like Greg Valentine, Virgil, and
Jim Neidhart.
Yeah.
King Kong Bundy, yeah.
Yeah. But he was never bad. Like, he's a guy that it's kind of like I always liked him when I was a kid or whatever, but he's a guy that he's one of those guys that the older you get or the older you got or whatever, when you went back and watched shit, you're like, man, that guy was so fucking good.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't realize how good he was when you were a kid, because he was out. And when I say it, I'm not saying it like being disrespectful, but like a background guy.
Right. Right.
Like, he was behind Piper, or he was behind this guy or behind that guy. And yeah, he was always, and you look at it now, it's like, man, this guy was so he had such great ring psychology and was always at the right place at the right time. And yeah, he was fucking fantastic. And
him, Piper, and Orndorff were a hell of a triple threat there for a minute.
Yep.
Until they did the whole thing turning them on Orndorff or whatever. But yeah, that was
the original DX.
Yeah. 136, 6'1", 244, Mustafa Saeed, course, one half of the Gangstas. We talk about them a lot on the Reliving the Extreme podcast. I remember back then, back when I first started seeing ECW anyway. I thought that act of New Jack and Mustafa was, I don't want to call it revolutionary, but it was especially where we grew up and knowing how people in the inner city worked and different things like that, and the fact you just see some fucking crazy lunatic guy or a guy that was like Mustafa walking around or whatever. It was almost like in that era of wrestling, it was very real. If that makes sense, it was very real.
Yeah, and he wasn't obviously as talented or whatever as New Jack. And say what you want to say about New Jack, and I'm sure we haven't talked about him yet, and I'm sure we're going to get to him at some point in the 500 now. But the way Mustafa carried himself in like the promos and all that shit, like his character almost seemed more unhinged than New Jack.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he presented himself and carried himself as very intimidating.
Unstable.
Yeah, that guy is unstable.
Yeah. Like there's something about Mustafa and New Jack cutting a promo in like a staircase in what looks like a 100-year-old apartment building with one light bulb in the staircase. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah. I don't know. I'm trying to describe what I see in my head, but it's like, wow, you're closed into the staircase with these men, and this one guy's a fucking Looney Tune.
Yeah. He's not even wearing an entire mask. Like, it's just covering his nose. It's like, what's going on there?
He's just going.
Yeah, it's like that guy's more intimidating than New Jack. I'm sorry. I can at least speak to this guy.
135 is Ricky Morton, 5'11", 228, 17 years pro. 94, what it goes through here, obviously, is the Rock and Roll Express having their feud with the Gangstas and Smoky Mountain Wrestling. And then he has, at this point, started wrestling in several Tennessee independents. Ricky Morton, one of the great baby faces of all time, even into like the mid-90s at this point.
And like I said, I'm sure we're going to get up to New Jack here in a minute, but it's like the Gangstas working with Ricky and Robert. That's where I watched a shoot interview once with New Jack where he said that's where I felt like I earned the right to do the hardcore stuff because I learned how to do the flip flop and fly with Ricky and Robert. You know what I mean? Like he's like, I know how to wrestle because I did it with those guys. And saying that, I mean, like Ricky and Robert could take a tag team that might not necessarily be the most like gifted tag team in the ring or whatever and get everything out of them. And then you put them in there with two guys that really know how to do what they know how to do, and you're gonna see the best thing on the fucking planet.
Yeah,
they were the tag. And I know we're talking singles, but I would say like the Rock and Roll Express or like the tag team equivalent of Ricky Steamboat. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you could tell me a wrestler that you're like, oh, I don't think that guy was ever that good. You know, oh, he wasn't that great. Like people say that about Luger, which I don't always agree with.
No. You know 89, 90 Luger is fantastic. Sorry. Yeah. I love
but
Luger.
He was never any better than when he was. I don't think Lex Luger was ever any better than like the few times we got to watch him work with Ricky Steamboat. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is with like the Gangstas and the Rock and Roll Express. and some of the other teams they worked with. And Ricky at this time, like he had been a heel, which was stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the dumbest thing in the world. Making him Richard Wharton. I didn't like that. But
Nope.
yeah. So this was the Smoky Mountain time, and it was good shit. Putting him and Robert back together.
134 is Shinya Hashimoto, 5'11", 285, 11 years pro, former IWGP heavyweight champion, one of the best in New Japan. Trained with Great Muta, Masachono, and Jushin Liger. So Hashimoto, Muta, Chono, and Liger, that's a hell of a class.
They were what were gonna be the pillars.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I can't remember what year Moto died. I don't know if he died in like 97.
Yeah, it wasn't too long after this.
But he was a guy that I think we might even talked about it on their show, that if he wouldn't have died as early as he did, I think he would have wound up over here.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And he was
a big deal.
Yeah, I was gonna say he had the build and the body for. And I'm not saying some of the smaller guys don't, but I'm saying he had the build and the body to come over here and wrestle the heavyweights, you know?
Yeah.
Speaking of heavyweights, 133, Henry Godwin, 6'6", 285, 6 years pro. That's funny to me, too. Like, sometimes they do the gimmick. Like, we've joked about how they're like, Axe had only been wrestling for 8 years.
Yeah.
But then Henry Godwin, they say 6, which it is literally 6 at this point for Mark Canterbury. So anyway, at this point, 95, he's come in, he turned babyface, slopped Ted DiBiase. Godwin came in late 94. Which I always contest is like the most boring year in the WWF, and then 95 is the most gimmicked up, like goofy gimmicked up year in the WWF.
Yeah, but it's also
not as boring. It's not boring like 94, but it's gimmicked up.
But 94, 95 is crazy. 94, 95 is crazy because you can say, oh, it was boring, and then it was gimmicked up. But it was like that fucking roster was so goddamn good.
95, yes. 94, I will contest. There is a point in 94 where there is a big drop off between your top 8 guys and the rest of the roster until you hit like maybe WrestleMania 11 time, and then the roster picks up. Like 95, we've discussed before, like Bret Hart in 95 wrestles all these gimmicks like Hakushi and Isaac Yankem and all that, but they're all fantastic wrestlers and fantastic matches. But anyway, back to Godwin. My point was Henry came in during heavy gimmick time, but he turned that gimmick into something. And as silly as it was to, I don't know. There's always hillbillies in wrestling. So I enjoyed Henry Godwin. I thought he was good.
I did too. And he was a legit badass. And
he was,
there's no holes in Mark Canterbury's game.
No. And it enhanced him. It enhanced him to put him with Hillbilly Jim.
Yeah.
And then eventually Phineas, because before that, and the reason I say it enhanced him is because every bit of the act makes a difference. Example, for him to start being able to, the only change is really that with Hillbilly Jim being with him is that now he comes out to Don't Go Messing with a Country Boy, which is good because his entrance music before that was awful. And how would any crowd get into that with him coming? You know what I mean? Down, down, down. Pig. Like that music.
Pig.
That music is not, and no matter how much of a baby face he is, that music is not going to inspire a pop.
No, it's not. The only thing as a kid, I even thought it, and as an adult, I even think it. I think it's Vince McMahon going pig, 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 pig. I think it's Vince.
I'll have to like get it up on YouTube or something at some point and listen to it.
I swear to God, it's Vince.
Sounds like something Vince would do.
Yeah.
Talked about him just a few couple of minutes ago being part of the East Coast indie crew a lot of the time. 132, Jim Neidhart. 6'1", 275, 16 years pro. He is back in the indies at this point because he had been in the WWF in late 94. And then after the tag team tournament in early 95, he's Splitsville again until he comes back as Who in 96. So Neidhart just floating around during 95.
I just watched him in one of my favorite non-wrestling segments in wrestling history, if that makes sense.
I know what you're talking
It
about.
was it's a mating game.
Yes.
It's like
Rolanda? Is it Rolanda?
Yeah. Yolanda.
Yolanda, that's it. Yolanda.
Because the hot blonde says, "Fuck it, I don't want any of these people," and then Yolanda picks Neidhart, and he's like, what's that on her face?
And Brett's fucking popping.
He's like, "What's that on her face?" So even Vince was his goddamn mind with that shit. And then she's like, "I'll just give you the $10,000, the whole $10,000 if you go out with me," you know. And he's like, I guess the foundation needs the money, Jimmy. But no, that dude. I am never ever gonna say that like Jim Neidhart was the greatest like in-ring worker in the world, but he wasn't bad.
No,
Not at
any
all.
way, shape, or form.
No shape. But like
he was made to be a part of a tag team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he was made to be
Definitely.
a tag team wrestler.
And that personality and that gimmick and just the beard and everything about him is fucking great.
There's only one thing when he transitioned from like Mid-South, that area and stuff, into the WWF that I wish he would have kept. The hat. Where's that fedora or whatever? It's not really a fedora. It's like, I don't know, but yeah, he had that. He wore a hat. He wore the hat. So did Arn Anderson. All them guys wore a hat.
Yeah, but it's almost like what I was saying about Mustafa. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like you put Brett and Jimmy with him, and they cut these great promos and shit, and then there's this guy that's just behind him that's just like a fucking psychopath.
Yeah,
you know? And it's like that dude. Like if you look at it as if this shit's real, it's like that guy's a fucking psychopath. And he kept up and he did a great job. And I always enjoyed Jim Neidhart, and I don't know if I'm rambling about him or whatever, but I don't know what he was. I don't know where he would have been at this point. Probably, like you said, like Northeast Indies or whatever.
Yeah, he pretty much for in 95 and then a lot of 96, except like I said, when he was doing the Who thing in the WWF to, pay Vince back pretty much the money he owed him. He pretty much is just indie, just going all over the indies with guys that he's familiar with, like Valentine and that sort of guy.
I still think it's crazy that him and Brett never had a match on TV.
It is.
That's insane. Because they never had a singles match on television. That's nuts.
All the buildup that they did of him being like the guy that was behind, and I don't know if it would have happened because in early 95 he left, but so maybe at some point it would have happened on a Raw or something. But yeah, you're right. It's wild. That's just like I was thinking the other day. Like I was like, all right, trivia question that I was going to ask on. I was actually going to ask it on Reliving the Extreme last night, and I'll just ask you to now, just because while I'm thinking about it. Another thing that's crazy to think of is what huge 90s WWF star the whole time he was there was never in a Royal Rumble match.
Razor.
Yeah. Razor Ramon, never in the Royal Rumble match.
It's because he always had the Intercontinental belt.
Mm. Except 93, but he wasn't in at 93 because they gave him the world title shot at Brett.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like, he was always in a title picture.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
Razor was never in a Rumble.
131, Dick Slater, 6'1", 235, 26 years pro. At this point, he's in the stud stable. Him and Buckhouse Buck were the tag team champions in WCW. I always joke around about Dick Slater just doing a whole career of doing a Terry Funk impression. But Dick Slater, and that's just my joke, because he really did, in a way. But
Yeah.
I will say Dick Slater, what's funny is I'm not a big fan of his. I'll be honest with you, I'm not. I'm just not a big Dick Slater fan. But I love Dick Slater in the stud stable because I love the stud stable.
I don't love anything about the stud stable.
Yeah.
Like, how do we try to say it? Like, like the 95 PWI 500 is kind of basically the 94 crowd or 94 crew of wrestling. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And 94 was like the last great year of what WCW was, if that makes sense.
Yeah, before Hogan.
Yeah. Like, it was good shit. And the stud stable was awesome. And I actually do like Dick Slater. I mean, he was a scumbag when you get into his personal life, but in the ring and his wrestling career, I like Dick Slater.
Number 130 is Duke Drosy, 6'5", 306, 8 years pro. Of course, he's Duke the Dumpster Drosy, the WWF. 95, it's funny because Duke Drosy, Duke Drosy, it's funny because he was in the WWF for like almost 2.5 years and was rarely ever hardly in a program. Like he had the
two of them.
He had the program with Hunter
and then Lawler.
And he had a program with Lawler. And other than that, he just was just in action every week. He was never like he was like in action beating jobbers on TV and then jobbing to the stars on house shows, pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't mind Drosy. He's fine. It's not like he's a
solid worker.
Yeah. But yeah, he just never fucking did anything. It might have helped him if they actually did do the thing where he sold out to DiBiase. But instead, they signed them signing Steve Austin is what fucked Drosy out of that. Because they were grooming Drosy to be the $1 million champion, and then they signed Austin.
Yeah.
So,
the fact that he wasn't, I don't know. I just think Drew Drosy he looked good. He had a good, look and all that shit, but I don't know if he was I don't know, as charismatic as he could have been, if that makes sense.
No, I agree. Number 129, Miguel Perez Jr., 6'1", 232, 9 years pro. Former WWE star, is now wrestling for IWA in Japan. Feuded with Cactus Jack and EMLL in Mexico. Excellent endurance, wins most matches that go beyond 30 minutes. Son of former Latin favorite Miguel Sr.
The hairy one?
Yes, Miguel Perez Jr. is the hairy one. I was a fan of Miguel Perez Jr.
I thought he was a good worker. I don't know. Being that hairy and hairy like an orangutan, unless you're like I don't know. I don't see that getting over.
128. Genchiro Tenryu, 6'1", 235, 19 years pro at this point. Oh, Tenryu. Isuzu? Thinking about when Regis interviews him and Katao at WrestleMania 7.
I
Like, why does Regis talk to them like they're cavemen? He's like, I Regis, you Tenryu.
Because they're Japanese and it was the 90s and shit could still be racist and be okay. Like, I feel bad because, like, when I watch, like, Japanese matches or whatever, and I see Tenra, I'm like, oh, man, you said Tenra, right?
Yep.
I watch it, I'm like, this guy was so fucking good. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then his time to get over here was in WrestleMania. And he teamed with Katao, and Katao fucked up, and nobody liked him over here. Like, Bobby Heenan's like, who's his partner? Hand Towel? And they have to fight that, like, shitty version of Demolition.
Yeah.
It was just so bad.
And then he was in WWF twice. He was at WrestleMania 7 because they were doing that thing. They were doing that cross promotion thing with SWS at that point.
Yeah.
And then he's in the Royal Rumble in '94. But then, like, they just like turn him into one of like, I don't know. Doesn't he and Kabuki just stooge for Fuji and like beat up Luger because they're Japanese?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was all a bunch of bad shit. And it got him over here and it got him a payday or whatever. So good for him. But, like, if you watch his matches, the dude was a badass.
Oh yeah, no
Can't
doubt.
deny it.
127 Negro Casas, 5'7", 180, 16 years pro. Some compare this Mexico City native's impressive technical skills to those of Bret Hart and Ric Flair. Has held numerous middleweight titles throughout the world. No glaring weaknesses. Very personable. One of the I'd say one of the better technical wrestlers in Mexican wrestling for his time. Everything I've ever seen, I really liked. But I don't have a lot more to say about him, you know. And
I mean, I do like that he's very personable. He'll hold the door for you. He's a nice guy.
He'll walk up to you and he'll be like, "What's up, my negro?"
Yeah.
126 is New Jack. We just talked about him when we talked about Mustafa. New Jack, one of those guys people either love New Jack or hate New Jack.
Yeah, I know our buddy doesn't like him, but I think that guy was fucking great.
I have always been highly entertained by New Jack. And New Jack is also not only highly entertaining as a wrestler and a performer, but super stupid entertaining as a shoot interview. Like,
yeah,
whether or not what he's saying is the truth or not, I don't care because I'm just mesmerized and watching him, you know?
Yeah.
Fuck you, Larry.
Yeah. Kiss the ring, Larry.
Larry.
Why don't you feed the boys free steak, Larry?
Larry.
And it's like, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Like, he's NWO Sting or ECW Sting. You know what I mean? Like, and I know it's silly when I say it, but it's like in 97 when, like, or 96, 97 when, like, the NWO would be beating people down, Sting would show up.
Right.
You know what I mean? And ECW when the heels would be doing whatever they were doing, the natural born killer shit would hit and Sting and New Jack would show up. It was good shit. And and I, like, at this point he's in Smoky Mountain and getting ready to go into ECW, and he was doing shit that nobody else was doing. and nobody else would have been how do I want to say it? Courageous enough to say. Like, I'm not even saying he believed everything he was saying. You know what I mean? But
Right.
like the guy was willing enough to say, "Fuck it, I'll say this shit.
Mm-hmm.
It may fuck my career over. I don't care, but I'm gonna say it because it's gonna get fucking. It's
Heat.
gonna get one of two things. It's gonna get heat, or it's gonna get me fucking killed in a ditch. But I don't give a fuck because I'm gonna
It
say it."
it's a different type of situation, but it is the same type of thing that Gorgeous George did, acting effeminate in the 50s in the ring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he
Yeah.
very well could have had a bunch of homophobic hillbilly fuckers attack him out back. You know what I mean? Like, but it's all about getting the heat.
But he was also a guy that knew if these guys attack me, guess what? I could probably take at least three of
Right,
them.
right.
You know what I mean? Like Gorgeous George wasn't a feminine motherfucker.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's why he felt confident enough to be able to go out there and do that shit. Because if somebody's gonna try to get me in a fucking Piggly Wiggly parking lot, I'll probably be able to pop their head off a fucking bumper in this off a car in this parking lot. And New Jack knew the same thing. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And the shit was great.
I agree.
Like him
Totally agree.
saying, OJ, two down, brother, keep going for more or whatever, you know what I mean? It's like great shit, man. Fucking great.
Number 125, Aldo Montoya. 6', 225,
Mhm.
3 years pro. He is the Portuguese man of war, Aldo Montoya.
Yeah.
Mr. Perfect. WWF. I know the joke is dumb. It's just hearing Mr. Perfect say it though. The first WWF superstars. He comes back. He comes back at Survivor Series '95, and then they do a thing where Lawler says he wants to focus on challenging the new WWF champion Bret the Hitman Hart. So he's going to leave commentary and he's going to bring in somebody to commentate with Vince McMahon and Jim Ross. And then Jim Ross and Vince McMahon welcome Mr. Perfect to WWF Superstars. And Mr. Perfect says he's there to be a perfect commentator, nothing but class, et cetera, et cetera. Like, he's just putting it over like he's just going to be so classy, everything. And then the first person that comes out to shoot is Aldo Montoya. And Mr. Perfect goes, "Why this guy got his jock on his head, McMahon?" And Jim Ross is like, "Oh my God." It's fucking great.
Do you know how that came about?
The jockstrap on there, his mask, his funky mask.
Well, his name,
I
or
don't
just
think
his
so.
gimmick. His gimmick was because um, PJ apparently mentioned to them that he had like Portuguese, how
Portuguese.
do you say it?
Portuguese.
Portuguese heritage, and they wanted him to be like a soccer star, like Pele
Hmm.
or whatever. And then it just like snowballed into him being the Portuguese man of war, Aldo Montoya. Just because he said he had Portuguese, I can't say
Just because he had Porky Pig blood.
it. Just because he was Latin
Hmm.
and kind of like soccer, and they thought about him being like a soccer star, and they'd be able to get him over as a Latin star, and then it turned into him being that fucking stupid gimmick.
Yeah. And I mean, it didn't amount to nothing, of course. And he goes on to be just incredible in ECW. But yeah, and It's kind of crazy though, because like you don't think about it in the context of anything. But he is Aldo Montoya for a long ass fucking time too.
Oh, very long.
Like
Very long.
sometimes I watch stuff in '97. I'm like, holy fuck, he is still Aldo Montoya in
Yeah,
'97.
he was Aldenoy. He was Aldo Montoya for like 3 fucking years. And they didn't change any of it.
Yeah, right. Everybody else is evolving.
Not you.
124. Hey yo, it's Big Titan, who is going to go on to become Fake Razor Ramon. At this point, he's in Japan and Canada. I don't have a lot to say about Big Titan.
Rick Wagner.
Yeah.
His real name.
Yeah.
He sucked.
Number 123. 6'7", 345 at this point, 21 years pro, is the Ugandan giant Kamala. 95, he had a short stint in WCW as a part of the Dungeon of Doom.
I have absolutely, let's get, you might disagree, but I have absolutely nothing bad to say about Kamala.
Oh, no, not at all. That guy took the gimmick. He took a gimmick that should have lasted 6 months and made that gimmick last an entire career.
And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think he's the guy that got Taker over more than anybody at the beginning of the Taker career.
Yeah, because he was scared of the casket. It added he helped add depth to the Undertaker character, if that makes sense, because it was very one note until that point. And if you would have integrated something else like the extra with the casket match and et cetera, and especially this beast like Kamala being afraid, because the Undertaker, there were a couple of times in its first probably like until probably what would you say 96, before he became like the conscience of the Federation or whatever, that Undertaker gimmick could have very easily faded away.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I know Hogan put him over or whatever, but Hogan didn't act afraid of the Undertaker.
No, and the intention was for after he feuded with Hogan for that gimmick to go away.
Yeah, and then when it didn't, Jake did good shit with him, but Jake wasn't afraid of the Undertaker.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Jake's character was almost finding the weaknesses of him.
Well, and Jake's character, where Jake's character helped the Undertaker character, was Jake's character was so evil that was the only person you could have turned a character like the Undertaker babyface against.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like there wasn't any character before Kamala that was just like, holy shit. Like, if Kamala's character could speak, his character the entire time would have been like, oh my God, holy fucking shit. What is happening?
The big eyes,
happening to me?
Fucking big eyes, and his facial expressions are so good in that feud.
Oh, yeah. And that Kamala character was fantastic.
It's also funny just getting back into 95. It's funny when it's not funny, it's ridiculous. There's a difference between funny and ridiculous. But when they'd have videos about the Dungeon of Doom, they'd be like, the Dungeon of Doom, the shark, Kamala. Like they play their little sound effect or whatever when they say their name.
And I think at this point, he even went back with Lawler, and he was in like those little Memphis studios saying, "Holding me back."
Yeah, I think that is in 90. That's either 95 or 96. Yeah.
Holding me back. And it's like him singing, but he's still lip syncing him singing. And then Lawler hits him with like a ukulele. It's like, oh, this shit's fucking fun.
Back in Memphis. Number 122, Crash the Terminator. 5'10", 235 years pro. At this point, the Pennsylvania Championship Wrestling Heavyweight Champion feuding with Johnny Gunn, managed by Judd the Stud. We all know that Crash the Terminator is eventually going to be humorous. It's Bill DeMott.
Kevin Sullivan called him and said, "Are you still fat? Can you still work?
I have a job for you."
I like Bill DeMott, and you know I do.
Mm-hmm.
I know he's not probably on everybody's radar as being somebody everybody likes, but I enjoyed the guy.
He so did he like when he retired and went into being a trainer, probably 05, 06, did he get hurt? Or did they just decide they didn't want him to wrestle anymore and he was going to be a trainer? Or did he get hurts?
I believe he got hurt. I believe he got hurt.
Because he's just one of those guys that he's one of those guys that is from the Monday Night Wars, but is kind of a forgotten name from the Monday Night Wars because he didn't evolve into the next era, if that makes sense.
If I remember right, he got a knee injury and then he went into training and he fell victim of being like one of those guys of the last kind of like territory, not corporate era guys, you know?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And the way he went about it was like, we can't have you in a corporate type environment.
Number 121 is Ron Simmons, 6'2", 269 years pro. In 95,
he's just going to Vince, right?
He's not going to go to Vince until summer of 96.
All right, he's ECW then.
Yeah, 95 is Japan and ECW for Ron Simmons.
Ron's the guy that no hole in the game, obviously.
And he's one of the he's one of the guys like Rude and Foley that once Hogan showed up and showed him and his boys started with their shenanigans, they were like, "I'm fucking leaving." I know Foley's thing was kind of different because he had the heat with Flair too, but he also saw the writing on the wall with Hogan being around. But Rick Rude and Ron Simmons were like, peace. Like Ron Simmons was like, I don't need this shit, you know?
Well, let me ask you this about Ron, because I've asked you this about other guys before. Because his career was like equally in both. But would you say now, if I asked you, is Ron Simmons an NWA WCW guy or a WWE guy?
WWE. But see, it's also weird because in he's almost a guy that's like, it's not that he wasn't Ron Simmons as Farouk, but it's almost like Farouk is a different thing than Ron Simmons. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
like the Ron Simmons of like WCW in Doom, and then as the the babyface, the Bill Watts era, the champion, and all that. Like it's almost like he has two different careers.
Why not? That's kind of what I understand that. But I'm just saying, like, if I say, "Hey, Ron Simmons," what do you think about?
WWF. His WWF stuff.
All right.
Yeah, I think about him more as Farouk, the Nation of Domination, and then with the APA, and then damn. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, let's see, 120, one of my favorites, La Parka, 6'1", 235, 8 years pro. La Parca is one of my favorite Mexican professional wrestlers of all the times.
I wouldn't disagree with that. And I would say La Parca was, and I think I've said it before a couple times on on the We Can't Wrestle podcast, that I think he was one of the guys that, um, for one, was big enough stature wise to work with, like, some of the American wrestlers, and also understood, like, the American style of professional wrestling. There's a reason, like, La Parca was like the TV champion.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? There's a reason that they were able to say, "Oh, here's La Parca versus Randy Savage," and it was DDP under the mask.
Right.
Because he translated well into United States wrestling.
But yeah, great wrestler, entertaining as hell. Still good to this day. So, number 119 is Stevie Ray, 6'1", 244, 6 years pro, one half of Harlem Heat with his brother Booker T. Held the WCW World Tag Straps 2 times. And then, of course, 94, late 94 into 95 is a great fucking time for Harlem Heat. They're feuding with the Nasty Boys, having great matches, feuding with the fucking Stud Stable, having great matches. They got Sherry. They are firing on all cylinders. Our Harlem Heat in this time frame.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, and you could probably even ask Stevie Ray, "Hey, do you think you're as good as Booker?" And he's gonna tell you no, obviously. You know what I mean? But personality wise and charisma wise or whatever, Stevie Ray was really good. Like, every tag team needs that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, not every tag team is gonna be. I'm trying to think of a tag team that they broke up, that a promotion broke up, and both of them became big stars.
It doesn't happen very often. There's usually
It doesn't.
I hate to use the analogy, but there's usually a Sean and there's a Marty. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or every team needs it. Every team needs a Neidhart. And if you look at, like, the Harlem Heat, like, Stevie Ray's the Neidhart. You know what I mean? Like, would Booker have been able to get to the success that he would have had if he wouldn't have had Stevie with him?
No.
I don't think he would have. And I don't think Brett would have been able to get to the success that he had if he wouldn't have had Neidhart with him.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you gotta give him props on that.
118. Who knows? Who knows who this could even be? I mean, it's probably about, I assume, Ray Apollo. Doink the Clown. 95. There's all kind of doinks all over the country, but I would assume the one that's being ranked here is Ray Apollo, right? That was the guy.
Yeah.
One of the there's a couple of Apollos and like jobbers in wrestling. But I think it was Ray Apollo that was the doink after Matt Bourne left the WWF.
Like, Babyface Doink.
Babyface Doink is garbage. Babyface Doink is involved in so much bad stuff. Like, I love Jerry the King Lawler, and I think he can make almost anything entertaining. But I can't even stomach his feud with Doink. Ugh.
Yeah, when you have, like, the midgets with him and shit. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's more of that 94 curse, by the way. Fuck 94 in the WWF. Other than WrestleMania 10.
The only thing they did right was make Lawler's midgets hairy, just like him.
But yeah, I'm saying, like, 94 WWF, there's some great matches, the ladder match, stuff with Brett and Owen, but overall, that promotion is rough. And anyway.
It's like, it's bad. But yeah, we don't need to talk. We don't need to talk about 94 Doink.
117, flip side here, Bunkhouse Buck, 6'5", 239.
Yeah.
And here's what I'm talking about. Remember they said Henry Godwin, 6 years, even though he'd only been Henry Godwin for a year.
Yeah.
117, Bunkhouse Buck, 6'5", 239, 2 years pro. How
He's
long
been
had
going
Jimmy?
since like
How long had Jimmy
79.
Golden? How long had Jimmy Golden been wrestling at this point?
Like since like 1979.
2
Probably
years
even
pro.
before that.
Other than being fantastic in the ring, other than like being great at the gimmick and everything about it, you know what else he did great as Bunkhouse Buck? Somehow he made himself look like you would think he smells.
Yeah.
Like that guy
I
looks
said
like
seven.
that guy looks like he smells like cat pee.
Yeah, I said 79, right?
Yes.
Jimmy Golden, James Golden, debuted in 1968.
Jesus Christ. 2 years pro.
2 years pro. Like he wrestled like as early as going to Australia for Jim Barnett.
My boy.
Like the original WCW this
Yeah,
guy worked
yeah.
in. But he's been working for 2 years.
2 years.
He has a great fucking career. I've gotta say, like I like him, and even when we did like, put together a territory, like when we did those shows or
Yeah.
whatever, like, it's like I picked him and Robert Fuller obviously to be like a tag team in my promote. Like the guy was fucking great. And um in 94 he did fantastic. He had great matches with Dustin, which is obviously hard to have a fucking bad match with Dustin Rhodes. You know what I mean? But like
Mhm.
him and Dustin had great fucking bull rope matches and hardcore matches and shit. Yeah. There's there's nothing you can discount on fucking Jimmy Golden. He was great. I know we called him Buckhouse Buck on this, but great worker and should be talked about more than what he is.
It's actually
His whole
fun.
family should be.
It's actually funny in there. I like I said, I'm not reading the descriptions really because these are people, unless it's somebody we need some context on. But it is funny in their write up of him here because they have all these things about how him and Dick Slater won the tag titles, and he claims to be the real bunkhouse champion. I don't know why, but the last line here cracks me up. Hates the Rhodes family. I don't know why that made me laugh.
No, it's just
116.
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say those are some guys now that he's in that like clan of people or group of people or whatever, or some of those group of people that I hope start getting recognized more now that wrestling's being ran
I
by wrestling people.
I also hope, for the sake of history, that no matter what happens with Peacock at the beginning of 2026, that a lot of the stuff and I know a lot of his stuff you have to find on YouTube anyway, because WWE doesn't have like Memphis or Smoky Mountain or whatever. Well, they do have some. Anyway, a lot of the stuff that he was involved in the southern territories and stuff isn't owned by WWE anyway. But my point is, there's guys like him and a Dick Slater or somebody or a Robert Parker that I hope, when the shit ends with Peacock and WWE, or if Peacock, they might resign to keep all that stuff, which is fine. I would love to not have to watch my shit all over the place. But I hope whoever is after Peacock still carries over that programming and they don't just shelf that shit, because those kind of guys will get lost to time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I'm
If it's
saying. Like now with like Hunter and Rock and and Brian James and these guys being involved in like it's Sean, being up in the higher ups of it. I hope that means something.
right. 116 is Doug Furnace. I think in 97, he's in Japan and Mexico in 97.
Well, in '97 he's in WWF.
I mean 95. I don't know
Mm,
why I don't know why I said
okay.
97, but yeah, 95. He's him and Crawford wrestling in Japan.
Yeah.
We saw when we were doing reliving the extreme, were they in ECW in 95 or 96?
Well, we've been in '96 for 10 years, so
Yeah.
'96. Um, Furnace did some time at Smoky Mountain too.
Yes.
But I would say he probably got this high in his ratings probably because of All Japan. Him and Crawford.
Let me see what they mentioned in the blurb here. Yeah, it's just his write up here pretty much talks about him and Crawford teaming up in All Japan and in Mexico. So 115 is El Hijo de Santo. Son of the legendary El Santo, competes in AAA, had brutal feud against Psychosis, has held several Mexican welterweight titles. I'll tell you this, if you've never seen damn it, El Hijo del Santo versus Psychosis, watch it. They have some great fucking matches together. So,
All right.
114. If Chad were here, he'd do it. I'll do it for him. Yeah. It's Raven. 6'1", 235, 8
I thought
years
Raven
pro.
would have been. I actually thought Raven was going to be rated higher. I'm not gonna lie. I thought he was.
In 95, let's see where they're at here as far as his timeline goes. Currently one half of the tag champions with Stevie Richards. Yeah, I don't think he's been the ECW champion yet because they're still writing about his time as Johnny Polo.
I still thought he would have got rated higher.
But he has started feuding with Dreamer. Old Raven, one of my favorites.
He's one of my favorites too. And like I told you, since I can't watch Raw, like chronologically, I just kept watching ECW or WCW.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, he's doing that shit where he's like, we find out Raven isn't actually a tortured youth. He was rich. Right now, he's hanging out with Canyon and shit. It's funny shit. Scott Levy, he's a fucking line for the business.
Oh yeah, absolute fucking genius. I will say that, absolute fucking genius.
I just think it's like, I don't want to say it, like, I don't know the guy, and I don't want to say whatever, but I think in general in life, I think he's like lazy, if that makes sense. And it's like, I don't want to do that shit. I don't want to go to fucking work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's what hurt him.
He also, I don't know. I always say it's like, the reason I say he's one of my favorites is because no matter what iteration of him, he was never not entertaining. He knew how to reinvent himself without being ridiculous like fucking Jericho or whatever. When Raven reinvented himself, he would reinvent himself as a version of Raven, or beforehand Johnny Polo as a version of Scotty Flamingo or whatever.
Yeah.
But I will honestly, and you can tell me if you think it's weird that I make this comparison, but like mind-wise, I say Raven is like the Hunter S. Thompson of wrestling. Like,
yeah, like he was out there with it, and it was like I was just saying with like the '99 shit that he did when he went and did that shit with WCW. Like he couldn't come out and say, "Hey, I was Johnny Polo," but if they said, "Hey, the whole time you were in ECW, where you were this disenfranchised or franchised youth or whatever, and now you're telling us you're rich. You can be like, well, look at me in '93. That's what I really was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he played off all that shit,
Right.
and it's just he had a great mind for the business. And when I say lazy, I just mean like I wish he would have wanted to do kind of what Vince wanted him to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Step into a creative role, a behind the scenes
Yeah.
role.
Like I'm a bigger fan of Scott Levy's mind than I am his in ring work. If that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
I totally agree. 113, Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
Man.
At this point, man, WCW 90s God bless Hacksaw. Hacksaw's
It's
fucking
rough.
great, man.
It's
Hacksaw's
rough here though.
he's a great dude. He was always fun to watch. He was always, you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, 95, 90, 90, and God bless him. 95 Duggan is just because he's friends with everybody. So he's friends with Hogan, and Hogan got him a job. And God bless him, he's getting a paycheck, but
Can I tell you when? Because I don't like to talk bad about the guy, because I know the guy himself is a great dude, like real life wise. You know what I mean,
Mhm.
or whatever. And like he was a badass son of a bitch, you know. But like when the bloom came off the rose for Hacksaw Jim Duggan for me was the same time it came off for Sergeant Slaughter, and it's when they teamed them together.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my fucking god. Like these two should not be doing anything now. The minute they put those two guys together, I was like, this is the end of me giving a shit about either one of them. If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
So by the time we got to 95 Jim Duggan, I'm like, holy shit. This is bad.
Number 112 is a guy that we mentioned a little bit earlier when we talked about Doug Furnace. It's Dan Croffett, 5'11", 235, 13 years pro. Of course, the WWF, he would be known as Phil LaFawn, but other than that, Dan Croffett, no, yes. The Phil LaFawn, yeah. I don't know why I doubted myself on what his WWF name
Oh, yeah.
was.
He was Philip LaFawn.
Um,
Dan Croffett was a solid worker, and just a guy that, I mean, in all honesty, I mean, Doug Furnace was great, you know, don't get me wrong. But Prophet worked the style of wrestling that I enjoy more than like a Doug Furnace or whatever.
mhm.
You know, it's like I'd rather watch a Prophet or a Malenko or a Benoit, like that type. And you know that about me.
Right.
But he worked the style that I like to watch, and he's that build a wrestler that I enjoy. So yeah, I don't know why they changed his name, because they didn't even have they didn't have any Dans other than Severn. And they didn't even have Dan Severn when he showed up. So I don't know
No.
why they made him Philip LaFawn. I'll never understand that. But he was a good worker. I enjoy his work.
Vince was like, Croffett sounds too close to Crockett.
Yeah, that might be it.
111 is Diamond at Dallas Page, 6'5", 264 years pro. Of course, 95 is the year that DDP starts making his transformation from kind of just like the pudgy manager guy into becoming a mainstream main event professional wrestler.
It's not yet. He's still really shitty at this point. If I'm gonna be honest with you, he's really shitty at this point. Like he's coming out of his
I guess
shit.
you're right. 95 is when he like feuded with Dave Sullivan.
Yeah,
And yeah,
like
you're right. You're
yeah,
right.
like he had his 94 run where every single pay-per-view was him versus Johnny B. Bad
Yeah.
as the opening match. And then Mark Marrow said, "Fuck it, I'm leaving." Because I keep fighting Diamond Dallas Page. And then he rolls into feuding with Dave Sullivan with Max Muscle as his fucking manager. And they feud over a fucking rabbit. This was trash. DDP fucking sucked at this point, and other than feuding with Randy Savage, never got better. I'm sorry.
Number 110, Man Mountain Rock.
This is what I'm gonna say. I'd put fucking Man Mountain Rock Max Payne over DDP.
Well, they
I
did
agree
in the
with this. I
1995.
agree with it. Because at least this guy had a talent. He could play a guitar.
It's funny
Good job,
because
buddy.
I got to say something about Man Mountain Rock because he's a guy like DDP. We've talked about a lot on the show. I like these things because sometimes we get to talk about people that don't come up a lot, and he hasn't come up a lot. And actually, as a matter of fact, the Man Mountain Rock thing actually was. I like this guy better in WCW for a number of reasons.
Hey,
Other
who's
than
better as Max Payne?
yes, and not to mention, first of all, in the WWF they made it like he wore like camouflage tie-dye jammies in the ring.
And we're a tie-dye onesie. It's like, what's
Yeah,
going on?
but like so in WWF he kind of stunk. It wasn't really his fault; it was their fault, I guess.
Oh, it
But
definitely was.
Max Payne was cool, man. I liked Max Payne.
Yeah, I like that shit when like he just nonchalantly shot Johnny B. Bad in the face
come,
with the
come get your bad blaster, Johnny.
and Johnny B. Bad went to get it. He just nonchalantly shot him in the face with it. It was like,
And I
like that
love
was good shit.
and I love the fact that when he cut his promos and stuff, he literally he didn't even try to hide the fact that his character was probably fucking high on heroin.
Yeah, he's like, hey man, and
Hey,
then like
Johnny, come get your bad blaster, man. I'll give you your bad blaster.
shoot him in the face. And then like I enjoyed him when he teamed with
Oh
Cactus.
shit, yeah. Hell yeah.
Like that was all good shit. Like WWF dropped the ball on that guy, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
I
Like,
agree.
he shouldn't have been brought in as a baby face. He should have
Mm-hmm.
been brought in as a heel. But yeah, I'd totally put him over DDP. Anybody you tell me going forward, even if I don't like them, I'm gonna say they were better than DDP.
Well, here's another one. 109 is Bobby Blaze. 6'1", 222, 7
I
years
like Bobby
pro.
Blaze.
What's that?
I like Bobby Blaze.
I do too.
But
Let's see what he's doing here. Just because former mid-card
Smoky
wrestler turned
Mountain?
won the Smoky Mountain Heavyweight title from Jerry Lawler with a little help from Buddy Landell. Native of Charlotte, North Carolina, faced NWA champion Dan Severn several times this year. So yeah, he's doing Smoky Mountain and wrestling Dan Severn. So
Yeah, another year he's gonna make a little bit of WCW. He's gonna get a little WCW time in another year. But yeah, I like Bobby Blaze.
number 108, figure it out. It's Johnny Ace. 6'3",
Johnny
250,
Laryngitis.
9 years porn, 9 years pro.
Here's part. Yeah,
Pro-
porn is more like it than what we found out.
Oh man.
Not
Oh
porn you
Johnny.
can legally get online, like more like dark web porn, but it's porn.
Here's Johnny, she said.
And then he came in her face.
Johnny, she said. He saw Vince's butthole.
Who shit on me? It's
It's
Johnny. It's Johnny.
Shit. What the?
Yeah,
It's so funny because it's Johnny Ace, and even when I watch old wrestling and I see him, you just can't it's. I'm sorry, but that's who he is now. He's the guy that is that guy for Vince. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I don't know. For everything he ever did in professional wrestling,
He's the
he's
guy
that
that shit on people with Vince.
he's that guy now.
And he wasn't bad either.
No,
You
no.
know what I mean? Like I know like some of the gimmicks that he was given are like the dynamic dude sucked or whatever. But once the bell rang, it was kind of like, yeah, the dynamic dude sucked. But when the bell rang, like Shane didn't suck. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And neither did Johnny. Like Johnny Laurinaitis was a good worker,
Yeah.
but
Vince
it's
was
like
like
everything.
Vince was like, Johnny, are you sure you're okay with this kinky shit I want to do tonight? Johnny was like, listen. I was with Mrs. Baba. Anything is fine, Vince.
Like I said, he was a good fucking worker, and he invented some shit. Like the Ace Crusher, like he invented that shit. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? But it's like everything he did, it doesn't matter
Apparently, he
anymore.
also invented the Cleveland steamer. All right, continuing on with the wild world and the wild characters of professional wrestling. Number 107 is the guy I believe holds the record for being hired and fired more times than anyone else in WWF history. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's Marty Jannetty.
It's Marty Jannetty.
Sometimes I can't remember if it's Marty or if it's Dustin.
No, it's Marty and Boogeyman, I do believe.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't even know Boogie. I didn't even realize Boogeyman was in the running.
I believe that's who it is Marty and the Boogeyman.
95,
But
95 Marty. It's funny
ECW,
because yeah, but he also 94, 95, and 96 is like he's in and out of the WWF during that 3-year span like 4 times.
yeah. And then something I heard and I didn't realize it was like when he went through the barbershop window, I guess like right after that happened, like his house got like drug rated or whatever because of the girl he was with. Like she was doing shit, and that's why it took so long for him to come back because like he got pinched on that or whatever. It's just like every time they were gonna do something with him, it was some legal shit
Oh
happening.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
you
Some
can't do
shit
that with
always
Marty.
happened.
And now I think he doesn't have a foot.
It's always a Marty party with Marty. 106, Steve Armstrong, 6'2", 225, 12 years pro. Had several classic battles against Buddy Landel when Landel held the Smoky Mountain belt. From a great wrestling family, wrestled with Tracy Smothers as a tag team called the Southern Boys.
He's the one that got it all, and I think I've told you that a couple times. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That I think he's
Yeah,
the
we
one
discussed that. We kind of discussed that last week.
that
Yeah.
if he wouldn't have been such a homebody, like he was the first one to go to Vince
Mm-hmm.
when he was like, what was that like?
Lance
What was his
Cassidy.
name? Lance Cassidy, the singing cowboy or whatever, and he just didn't like being on the fucking road. But if that dude would have wanted to be on the road and not cared about that shit, I think Steve would have been a bigger star than he was because
Mm-hmm.
he had the size, charisma, in rings, like he had all of it. So
105. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 105, baby. Bill Dundee. 5'7", 214, 21 years pro. Of course,
how
at this
tall did they
point,
say he was?
5'7".
Okay.
I mean, I can believe it. I'm 5'7".
Okay.
So
All right.
yeah, I could say Dundee's 5'7". Um, eh, like
I never enjoyed Bill Dundee, babyface Bill Dundee. I like heel Bill Dundee. Like when him
mhm.
and Buddy did like Buddy and Billy TV or whatever when they did that shit on CWA, and then when he was like, well, at this point, I think he's managing Regal, isn't he?
No, he's
Or is he
actually
done with that?
he's out of WCW at this point.
Okay.
I think 90, let's see, 95 he's back in USWA.
Okay.
Um I think actually he even is he trying to remember. I think he does a stint where he's like back to being heel Bill Dundee, but he's like helping PG-13 because JC Ice is his kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if he's a heel Bill Dundee, I enjoy. Babyface Bill Dundee, not a big fan of.
Yeah, I agree. 104, Jerry Sags, 6'3", 290, 9 years pro. Of course, one half of the Nasty Boys with Brian Knobbs. They 95, they feud with Harlem Heat. They feud with the Blue Bloods. They're part of a pretty
He's the
cool
good
tag
half
team
of the Nasty
division.
Boys.
I like
They,
both of the
them,
Nasty Boys.
well, yeah, I like Brian Knobbs too, but I'm just saying, like, when it comes down to like, hey, who's gonna work the majority of the match? That's not a hardcore match. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like,
right.
we're all gonna go out there and bust our ass and do hardcore shit on Spring Stampede, but who's gonna wrestle the majority of the match on Saturday night?
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be Jerry Sags. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Like, he's the worker of the group or the team. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And well, yeah, I'm not saying I don't like the Nasty Boys, but I'm just saying, like, if you had to pick the worker of this team, it's Jerry Sags.
Most definitely. The 103, that's gotta be Kane. That's gotta be. I'm sorry, it's Unabomb. 6'7", 345, 1 year pro. Former SMW tag champ with Al Snow. Looks almost exactly like Sid Vicious. Okay. Feuded with the
No, he
Rock and Roll
doesn't.
Express over the SMW titles. And assumed the persona of Dr. Isaac Yankum in the WWF. So once again, we mention Bret Hart's 1995, and spoiler alert, I think we're going to get to Bret Hart at some point in this 500. But
No,
another one of
if he's
those
not number one, he's going to be number two.
another one of those people that, you know, they gave him a stupid gimmick, but if you think about it, like Glenn Jacobs was in there like swimwear from the very beginning. Like, okay, yes, they gave him a stupid gimmick as a wrestling dentist, but his first program in the World Wrestling Federation is an upper mid card feud or an upper card feud with Bret the fucking Hitman Hart. Like,
Yeah,
like you debuted against Bret Hart.
yeah. Glenn Jacobs. Say, I know we all say crazy shit about Vince, like we were just saying or whatever, but you bring Glenn Jacobs into a locker room in front of Vince McMahon, he immediately has a boner. It's like, look at
Yeah.
this motherfucker.
Look at
You
this
know what I
fucking
mean?
guy. Yeah.
And then like that doesn't work. We're gonna have to let this fuck if you're gonna let that guy fire Hakushi before you fire this guy. You know what I
like
mean?
like
And
the trajectory of his career is he has his first his WWF career is he has his first literally his first program with fucking Bret Hart. Then his next thing is their last biggest star Diesel. They make him Diesel. And then after that doesn't work out, he gets to feud with the Undertaker.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like he's one of those big guys that like Vince had a hard on for that even everybody else couldn't deny.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a guy that, how do I say it? And you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I think, and he's not as big of a star as this guy, even though you said, like, he worked with the Undertaker. Like, Glenn Jacobs is a better worker than the Undertaker.
Overall, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Undertaker, where Mark Calloway, and I'm not saying Mark. I'm never going to say that the Undertaker isn't a great worker, but I think where Taker has the advantage over Jacobs is that Taker's a better showman, but Glenn
yeah,
Jacobs as a big man worker is a better worker. Yes,
definitely. And it's I'm trying to like think about like 95 or 94 Glenn Jacobs. It's like everybody liked the guy. You know what I mean? Like all the right people at the right time are like, we got to keep this guy employed. Like, don't let him leave. Don't let him go anywhere. Because he was in WCW just as a jobber. I think he was like,
Bruiser Mastino.
yeah, Bruiser Mastino, and he had like 2 matches with Sting or whatever. But like the right guys attached themselves to him, like Cornette, Ross, all those guys, like
Mm-hmm.
those couple guys, Bruce Pritchard. It was like, we gotta keep this guy. Like, this is the dude. And I'm glad it happened because he has one of the greatest careers in the history of wrestling. And it was like a career that shouldn't have happened because of all the shitty shit that was put on him. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he was the Christmas creature and a dentist, fake diesel. It's like,
Um. All right, we'll do two more because that'll get us up to start off at 100 next week.
all right.
102 is Ray Gonzalez, 6 foot, 235 years pro, still only in his early 20s. This Caribbean aerialist continues to improve. Has won the WWC Tag Team Championship with Ricky Santana. Defeated Eddie Gilbert in several matches in years past. I don't really know a lot about this Ray Gonzalez dude. I mean, I know he exists, but
I think he was the fake Tito. Fuck him.
we'll end with number 101. Done it. Shark. 6'4",
Oh yeah.
7 years pro, former sumo wrestlers, competed in the WWF before entering WCW. Of course, this is Earthquake. This is John Tenta. A couple of things about John Tenta. Great big man worker. Also, looked 50 when he was 26. Like,
yeah.
It's just insane to look at fucking John Tenta feuding with Hulk Hogan in 1989 and knowing he's like 25 years old. It's like, what?
You can look at pictures of a lot of people from that time though and say that. You know what I mean?
But I will contest he's an exception. Like, I thought until I knew the reality that when that dude was feuding with Hogan, he was in his 40s.
I agree, but like look at Rick Rude. Rick Rude was 40 years old when he died.
Mm-hmm.
But when he worked like SummerSlam against the Ultimate Warrior, you wouldn't have thought that dude was in his like early 30s or
Right.
whatever, or
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or even when you look at like pictures of your parents, you look at it, you're like, my dad was only like 21 years old right there. It's like people look different. Look at old West pictures, like the old timey pictures. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
when they take a picture of like I don't know. I'm trying to think of like an outlaw or whatever. Like name me an out like Wild Bill or whatever. If they take a picture of him and you're like, oh, look at that guy.
In his 50s. Yeah.
Yeah, you think he's in his 50s or his 60s.
Here's Wyatt Earp at 21.
Yeah. And you're like, what? He was only that old?
Then
Like,
you see a baby in the picture with the 5 o'clock shadow.
man, like, oh, Bill Hitchcock or whatever. And you're like, what? He was 21 when he was shot down. Like, that guy looked like he was 50.
He had a hell of a teenage years.
Yeah.
But yeah, John Tenta was really good. John Tenta was like John Tenta. He's kind of like Yoko, where you're like that frame, that build
He
can
shouldn't have been
move.
that fucking good.
Yeah, can do what that guy can do. It's fucking crazy.
And at the end of the day, I think should have been a bigger star than he was. I don't know why it didn't ever happen for him, but I think he should have been a bigger deal.
I think one of the things that and it's one of those things that where it actually became a detriment. It was good for him in the beginning, but I think it became a detriment to his career that he was so attached to Hogan, if that makes sense.
Possibly, yeah.
Because then all you ever become is fodder for Hulk Hogan. I mean,
Yeah.
I know at the time that's good money and that you're not stupid to take that position. I'm in no way or shape or form saying that. But in the long run, as your career goes on and for your legacy, maybe it's better to be a guy like Vader that's like, I'm not going to be fodder for Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, I get that too.
Well, that's going to wrap it up here for this week's episode of the We Can't Wrestle podcast and the PWI 500 from 1995. Next week, we will head into the top 100. Probably do 2 more episodes. We'll just do 50 per episode for the next 2, if that works for you.
That works for me.
So that being said,
or anything, so
that being said, we'll wrap it up here. Don't have a lot to talk about at the end of the show. Just want to wish a happy new year to all our listeners. Thank you for your continued support. Look us up on the YouTube, the WNR Podcast Network, if that's where you like to listen to your podcast, because we are gaining subscribers there. And the thing I really like about the YouTube page is
comments.
yes, you can actually. It's nice to see the because with podcasts, yeah, people can put feedback or whatever on a podcast, but being honest, I don't look at that a lot. I don't go to Apple Podcasts to read the comments on our show. But so the YouTube, it's nice because I get on YouTube every day. So it's nice to be able to see your comments. So please feel free to comment, suggestions, your opinion on anything we talk about, anything like that. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the feedback. So unless you have anything else to say, Aaron, we're going to sign off and get the fuck out of here.
The only thing I got to say is God rest David Lynch and Bob Uecker.
R.I.P. Yes, R.I.P. gentlemen, R.I.P. And in honor of Bob Uecker, yeah.
Would you get your foot off my shoulder?
No, I was gonna say yeah. Some guy. That's a great one, but I was my favorite punchline in that whole thing is yeah. Some guy named Vance White.
Streaks on the China. It never mattered before. Nobody
kick
cared.
Your jacket.
Drop kick your jacket. No one cares.
According
that
to
shit
our
got crazy
new arrival.
Yeah. That shit got crazy when that kid showed up that had AIDS and everybody freaked out. It's good. Those are my favorite. Those are my favorite 80s sitcom, 90s sitcom episodes is when somebody shows up and has AIDS. Now shit's about to pop off. Anyway.
We'll see you next time around, everybody. Have a great week. No.